Welcome to the internet. Have a look around. Anything that brain of yours can think of can be found. We've got mountains of content, some better, some worse. If none of it's of interest to you, you'd be the first. Welcome to the internet. Come and take a seat. Would you like to see the news or any famous women's feet? There's no need to panic. This isn't a test. Just nod or shake your head and we'll do the rest. Welcome to the internet. What would you...
That was comedian Bo Burnham from his new Netflix special, Inside, which he directed, shot, wrote, and produced all himself in one room. It is certainly not the first quote-unquote pandemic content that has come out, but certainly will be a gold standard going forward. Welcome back to Two Tickets, Please. I'm your host, Josiah Wampfler, and I have made you some content. I'll be exploring Burnham's uniquely raw, funny, and powerful statement on our pandemic world more in detail to close out this episode. We'll also talk about what the pandemic has meant for the film industry, specifically focusing on the places we have traditionally gone to see films, the theater. But first, we'll take a look at the movie adaptation of the musical that put Lin-Manuel Miranda on the map years before Hamilton. The movie musical has long been a standard of the cinema experience, but In the Heights, directed by John Chu, is anything but traditional. Let's dive into what makes it so special.
Once upon a time, in a faraway land called Washington Heights. Say it so it doesn't disappear.
Washington Heights!
Lights up on Washington Heights, up at the break of day. I wake up and I got this little punk I gotta chase away. Pop the grate at the crack of dawn, sing while I wipe down the awning.
Hey, y'all, good morning.
Ice cold piragua, cherry, strawberry, and just for today, I got my mate.
It's a story of a block that was disappearing.
The genius is back!
Yo, here's your chance, ask her out right now. Hey!
There's something on your shirt.
To say I was excited to see In the Heights would be an understatement. In 2009, I was fortunate enough to catch a performance at the Orpheum Theater in Minneapolis only a year after the show had won Best Musical at the Tony Awards. The experience ended up being one of the best live performances I've ever seen. And when Hamilton finally came around and everyone learned who Lin-Manuel Miranda was, I would find myself telling folks, just wait until you see In the Heights. Then finally in June, after much anticipation in my household, the film adaptation was released. My roommate and I got tickets at the Marcus Point Theater on their biggest screen available and took our seats with excitement. Within the first couple minutes, I knew we were in good hands. As the opening number begins, the show's lead, Usnavi, steps in some gum on a manhole cover, and the film did something genius. There is a record scratch as the music stops. Usnavi looks down at the gum, puts his foot back down, and spins the manhole cover like a record, kicking the music back in gear. It was such a wonderfully creative way of easing the audience into the magical and fantastical world that In the Heights was about to bring us. Like in many musicals, the opening number of In the Heights introduces us to the show's large cast of characters that live in the largely Latinx neighborhood of Washington Heights. It also focuses specifically on their dreams, or sueños. Usnavi dreams of leaving behind his struggling bodega and returning to his childhood home in the Dominican Republic to fix up his father's old shop and start anew. His friend Benny has dreams of being a rich and successful businessman. Vanessa, Usnavi's love interest, dreams of leaving the neighborhood in the dust for a fashion career and a flat in downtown New York City. The show also grapples with life not living up to the dreams the characters have. The day the show begins is the day Nina returns to the neighborhood, back from her first semester at Stanford, which certainly didn't live up to her expectations. She set out as the pride of her community, but is returning as someone who believes she has failed and is unsure of her future. Another character we find out quite literally is a dreamer. Brought to the US without papers, and because of their undocumented status, they learn that many of their dreams will be far more complicated, if not impossible. Dreams are complicated in the working-class barrio of Washington Heights. Not only are there financial barriers, but the Latinx residents deal with racial discrimination from the outside and the immense pressure to succeed from the inside. Nina feels like she has betrayed her community by not finding a way to succeed at Stanford. She also talks about the discrimination she faced there that made her feel isolated. Vanessa faces structural barriers to getting the flat she dreams of downtown. And even Usnave's dream, though he is the closest of any of them to achieving it, is its own commentary on the barriers Latinx people face and the complex nature of the immigrant experience. His bodega in Washington Heights barely scrapes by, and he sees a better shot for himself returning to the Dominican Republic to fix his late father's old shop, which has been decimated by the weather and years of neglect. Yet as the show progresses, the community he has become a part of in Washington Heights makes him question his decision to leave. All of this serves to make In the Heights a beautiful love letter to working-class Latinx Americans. And the realism also grounds the film, allowing John Chu to go to truly fantastical and magical heights with his filmmaking choices. Chu shows constantly throughout the film what the art of cinema can lend to a Broadway show. Too often, movie musicals feel a bit too much like a stage performance that happened to be filmed. But In the Heights expertly avoids that with its truly dynamic visual style. We have to talk about the dancing. Not only does Chu stage elaborate, impressive dance sequences that would be incredible to see on Broadway, but he shoots them like a fight scene in an action movie. His camera movements combined with the precise editing choices perfectly captures the incredible choreography and even adds energy to it. But Chu's dynamism goes beyond his cinematography and editing choices. As the film progresses, In the Heights gradually brings in more and more magic and surrealism into the numbers. In one song, as the characters are dreaming about what they would do with $96,000, their various dreams start to come to life in the form of white squiggly line props drawn on the screen. And as the intensity of the song builds, they get an entire water park full of people involved in a dance sequence that is probably one of the most impressive of the entire show. Later on, for a beautiful love song between Nina and Benny, Chu gives us a mesmerizing dance sequence that feels like a cross between Singing in the Rain and Inception as they dance up and down a gravity-defying fire escape. The wonderful cast, the incredible music, and the truly dynamic visual style of John Chu make this easily one of the best movie musicals I've seen. It was such a treat to get back into the movie theater to experience this glorious film, and I encourage everyone who has a love for musicals to run, not walk, to your nearest theatrical screening. You won't regret it. I'm giving In the Heights 4 out of 5 stars. It is also available on HBO Max, but again, I would definitely suggest the theatrical experience. Speaking of the theatrical experience, let's talk about movie theaters and what the future looks like for the theatrical cinema experience. One of the first jobs I had was working at the Lake 7 movie theater in Rice Lake, Wisconsin. I started off there at the concession stand, but over my time there, I also worked as an usher, a cleaner, a cashier at the box office, and for about a year or so before we switched to digital, I even worked as a projectionist, stringing up the old celluloid film for every show. It is one of the reasons I have a fond feeling for movie theaters. And as we're finally coming out of the pandemic, theaters are opening again. And we're starting to see the Hollywood release schedule pick back up after more than a year of disarray and uncertainty. But the question many theater owners are asking is, will they see their audiences return? And for many of those audiences, they may not have a theater to return to. I went back to Lake 7 Theater and talked to the current manager, Denise Waterhouse, about the experience of the pandemic and how they stayed afloat.
We did some popcorn sales for large 7-gallon Ziploc bags that definitely helped, and there were a couple of false starts too in July, and then once we got open at the end of August, but then it was definitely slow. For a while, a busy day would be 100 people, and before COVID, we used to have busy days where it was 700 people, so it was a definite change. Some people also just took a long time for us to realize we were open. They were so used to us being closed for so long, half the year, that it really took a while to us be open. And then a local dealership did free shows to the public, and that really helped They did it. For a while, they did it once a month. I mean, we have one coming up on the 17th, so that definitely got the word out.
The havoc the pandemic brought down on theaters was brutal across the country. Overall, box office returns in North America dropped from $11.4 billion in 2019 to just $2.2 billion in 2020. The theater chain Cinemark reported losses of $208 million in the first quarter of 2021 alone, and the Alamo Drafthouse chain had to file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection in December just to stay afloat. Some theaters found the pandemic too much to bear, though. In April 2021, the Hollywood ArcLight Theater and Cinerama Dome on Sunset Boulevard in LA shocked film fans by announcing the theater and others in the chain would not be reopening. Now, I'm sure you've probably seen pictures of the Cinerama Dome before because it and others in the ArcLight chain were icons of Los Angeles film culture. But the pandemic has now closed them for good. Most content going directly to streaming services and bypassing the theaters didn't help either. There has long been an antagonistic relationship between the industries, and the pandemic has likely changed viewing habits for good. But interestingly, Denise credited one streaming company's decision with possibly saving them.
Yeah, really until WB made the decision to release simultaneously with HBO Max and theater, it was slow and pretty rough for a while. But honestly, I think Warner Brothers saved us with that decision, to be honest. Because without those movies, it would have been even worse. And Godzilla vs. Kong in particular, I think, really, really brought people back. But yeah, WB definitely, I think, as much as that decision hurt us by going streaming, it also saved us, at least in my opinion. And I think because of the success of those movies, the studios started to release more and more.
So now the release calendar is revving back to life, and theaters are finally receiving the tentpole releases that they've been desperate for. But what kinds of movies will actually come back to the theater? And what ones will be released solely on streaming?
The biggest movies that will probably bring people back, and a lot of what people want to see with surround sound and a big screen is, in my opinion, more than likely going to be those big Marvel films or the action adventure films where it just sounds different and feels different at the theater. I definitely had a lot of customers even tell me that, like, Godzilla vs. Kong was something they didn't feel like they could watch on their little TV, you know? So I think every once in a while, you know, you get an adult film or, like, and not like just on a film for adults is what I'm trying to say. But we don't have a lot of those anymore. And I think those are going more on streaming, where it's just like adult dramas and thrillers. Not all of them, but some are finding their home there. And the genre, too, that I actually feel we've lost on is like the romantic comedy genre. Because a lot of those are going straight to Netflix. Like, if you look at what Netflix has released for, like, teenagers, it's exclusively, like, romance. And I think studios are missing an opportunity there to put stuff like that in the theater. We'll get one every once in a while, but not even like we did, like, 5 years ago. I think a lot of the studios understand and know that you can't get rid of us because there's a lot of people who don't have streaming services, so you can't just completely decimate the industry.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I definitely think there's certain genres that just will find homes on streaming services more than theater.
The future looks a lot better than it did a year ago for theaters, but it also looks complicated. My personal hope is that after being isolated from one another for over a year, that people will rediscover a love for movie theaters. Not every movie will be released on that big, beautiful screen, but for my money, there isn't a better way to watch a film. and I hope that we can all laugh, cry, jump, and scream together in the movie theater for many years to come.
If you'd have told me a year ago that I'd be locked inside of my home, I would have told you a year ago. Interesting, now leave me alone. Getting up, sitting down, going back to work might not help, but still it couldn't hurt. I'm sitting down, writing jokes, singing silly songs. I'm sorry I was gone, but look, I made you some content. Daddy made you your favorite open wide. Here comes the content. It's a beautiful day to stay inside.
After 6 years away, comedian Bo Burnham is back with a new Netflix special. And as with seemingly more and more comedy specials these days, it has sparked the ever so annoying discussion of, is this really a comedy special because it's not funny all the way through? And that's true. Over the course of an hour and 20 odd minutes, Burnham films himself performing several songs, talks to the camera or a fake audience, and some of it is funny, while other parts are quite dramatic and serious. But whatever you want to call it, to me, Inside is definitely a profound and arresting statement on the pandemic and the world we live in as we start to come out of this horrible and strange period. The entire special is quite literally filmed in quarantine. Burnham wrote, directed, shot, performed, and edited the special himself. It also takes place within the confines of one small white room. But what Burnham is able to bring us visually and emotionally within that space is truly spectacular. As Burnham points out early in the special, the project is somewhat disjointed, with abrupt editing choices throughout. Some of this is done for comedic effect, but other times the scattered brain flow of things, I think, perfectly encapsulates the feelings many of us had during isolation in the pandemic. It also allows Burnham to bring us a wide range of songs, interstitial comedy bits, behind-the-scenes footage, and small verite moments that in the end tell the story of a man struggling with his mental health and capture the sometimes torturous nature of attempting to create art. Throughout the special, he grapples with an obvious feeling of isolation and a desire to return to the outside world, but is also being pulled inward by his own depression, by the sense of comfort and security he feels, and by the reality of the pandemic. Now, I know you're probably thinking, this doesn't sound funny at all. How is this a comedy special? I don't want folks to get the impression that this thing is just depressing, so let's talk about the brilliant comedy contained within Inside. Burnham's brand of comedy has long revolved around several things: the internet, the hypocrisy he sees in the world, and the act of performance itself. All of those things seem to have been perfectly tailored for a comedy special in the COVID age. To start off the show, Burnham calls out himself and other white comedians for thinking they are healing the world with their comedy. In the peppy song, he points out that white guys like him have had the stage for a while, so maybe he should just shut up and give away his money instead, but then loudly responds no to that suggestion. The number is not only funny, but it's actually a really well-written song, and in classic Burnham fashion, there is some really good lighting effects. He also has a slow jam musical about the frustrations of FaceTiming his mom, something I'm sure many of us experienced over this last year. There is a great little jazz tune about the struggles of being an unpaid intern that then turns into a YouTube-style reaction video that takes some really hilarious twists. Immediately following a dive into the depressive, where he talks about turning 30, he brings it back to the realm of comedy with a great stripped-down driving pop song. Literally, he is in his underwear. And it's about the horror of already being 30. His homemade lighting effects add a great deal to the comedy of this song. The lighting effects are also a highlight of Welcome to the Internet, a Disney villain-esque song from the perspective of the internet itself that quite astutely and hilariously asks, what the hell have we created? The comedic MVPs of the show have got to be his 2 random songs about Jeff Bezos. These are also absolute bangers. A song wonderfully ribbing white women's Instagram accounts, and one that almost gets a little too real, a children's song with a sock puppet that turns into an explanation of the nature of global capitalism, colonialism, and exploitation. It's always hard to explain comedy without spoiling it, so you'll just have to check it out yourself. Still, despite Inside's great comedic bits, these moments aren't really what makes it truly special. It is all of the little moments where real, raw emotion creeps in and we relate to a man who is fighting with his demons in isolation. It is the songs that probably would be more funny if we didn't live in the current time we're living in. What actually makes Inside special is the fact that it doesn't cleanly fit within the comedy or drama boxes. A great example of that is That Funny Feeling, an acoustic campfire song that becomes more brilliant each time I listen to it. On first watch, it's a seemingly random cascade of things and ideas, but you quickly realize it's a lot like scrolling through your Twitter feed. And the line, "the world at your fingertips, the ocean at your door," tipped me off to an interesting comparison. That this was a lot like his much earlier song, Ironic, literally talking about the concept of irony. But whereas that song was upbeat and out-and-out comedic, this perfectly represented a concept known to many young people today, irony poisoning. It is when someone's worldview becomes dominated by nihilism and cynicism because of the deep irony they see in the poor state of the world around them. Those that fit this description often find comedy in dark places, but it is strained and becoming more strained over time. For Burnham, it seems like this song is exactly describing that sensation. He used to find big laugh lines out of the dark irony of reality, but in 2021, the line, "a gift shop at the gun range, a mass shooting at the mall," isn't too funny. My favorite part of the special, though, and really the song I consider to be the entire thesis of it, is All Eyes on Me. The second it started, I knew it was going to be that way. The closing song of Burnham's 2015 special, Make Happy, was a similar auto-tune-heavy R&B track, and similarly to this new song, it was an emotional roller coaster. Burnham starts the song arrayed in blue light in a tight close-up, his piercing eyes looking directly into the camera as beautiful synth chords build behind him, his voice artificially lowered, giving a sinister vibe to the song. At first, the lyrics, "Get your hands up," "Get out of your seats," "All eyes on me," seem to be those of a run-of-the-mill hype song. But then in the middle of the song, he cuts in with a brief story. He talks about how he quit performing live comedy 6 years prior because he was having severe panic attacks while on stage. He talks about his time away and how he actually got better. But just when he was preparing to get back out there and start performing again, in early 2020, the funniest thing happened. That thing obviously being the pandemic. It is here where the song reveals what it's really about, Burnham's depression and the mental health struggles he's having. He tells himself, seemingly in the voice of his own depression, that he doesn't care, the ocean is rising, people say the world is ending, but it already did, so he might as well just stay inside. Then to drive home the point of this being a representation of his mental state even further, Burnham grabs the camera off the tripod, erratically swinging it around the room as he wraps up the song, becoming audibly distressed as he does so. The song is, first off, beautifully written, with some angelic harmonies throughout, but it is also one of the most profound representations of depression, especially depression during this current time we're living in, that I've ever seen. And it so obviously is the thesis of the entire special. Burnham started the special by asking, what is there to joke about? He said that the act of making the special actually helped him cope with suicidal thoughts. He made several comedic songs and managed to make a special that included a lot of funny moments, but in the end, you'll have to excuse him a bit if it felt a little bit strained at times, and if it felt a bit hard to find the comedy. Because in the midst of such depression, in the midst of the horrifying events of the world around us, it does seem a bit hard to joke around. So if Inside isn't a gut-busting romp, that's kind of the point. You'll probably find your fair share to laugh about. I mean, there is a lot in there. But even more so, I think you'll find something that you can relate to on a human level. I think you'll find something that truly represents the experience we all just had during this crazy pandemic, and the uncertainty we all have coming out of it, only to start thinking about the climate crisis bearing down on us, and the many other ways our world is pretty messed up. Burnham's comedy has long been rooted in the meta-discussion of the experiences of being a performer and being an artist. In his 2015 special, Make Happy, he talks about how he strangely found many people connected with that story because of the nature of the internet age. Now, in 2021, it seems that his very specific story of an artist trapped in a room trying to create something and battling his inner demons is similarly surprisingly relatable. I'm giving Inside 5 out of 5 stars. It is available now on Netflix, and I would highly encourage making time for it. That wraps up this episode of 2 Tickets, Please. If you have any recommendations for future films I should cover, you can email me at josiah@ocamedia.com. I would love to hear them. Thanks for watching.